Good morning and welcome to the BuckeyeScoop Pregame Show for Ohio State and Nebraska. It is, noon kickoff today on Fox. I'm joined by BuckeyeScoop's Kevin Noon, BuckeyeScoop's Tony Gerdeman. Tony, we're going to go through the availability report shortly as soon as that is available to us. But, you know, what are the big storylines you're looking for today for this game?
I think the biggest storyline, well, there's two for me. And one, it's Ohio State's offense bouncing back from the difficulties they had last week, if you want to call that difficulties. I guess in the red zone there were difficulties. The other is, can Nebraska just not do something that costs them the game? Can they just be beaten outright by Ohio State and not have this heartbreaking fourth quarter thing? And I wonder, would it be better for the fan base if Ohio State just wins by 17 instead of winning by 7?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because at least it would be a different kind of loss for Nebraska. The same, just very haunting loss. They've had the season like a baseball team with a bad bullpen, where it's like you're winning, you're winning, you're winning. So you're in the game, you're in the game, you're in the game, and you just keep finding. As a Mets fan, I have a lot of experience with finding teams finding ways to lose. That, in my personal experience, is the worst one because at least in the sometimes you don't even need to turn the game on. It's okay. It's all right. With a bad bullpen, it's like the whole game you're just waiting for the sword of Damocles to fall, and then it falls. You're like, well, knew that was coming. That's a great way to go through life. Kevin, are you? What are you looking forward to most today for this game, or is there a player or a position group you think is kind of the one to watch for Ohio State today?
I want to see how the red zone offense looks after a real, meh game against Penn State. I mean, yes, they did manage to get 4 field goals, but only 1 touchdown. Are they going to be able to convert better in there? What is it that they're going to be? What are they going to do different? What's the execution going to be like? I don't see a type of defense in Nebraska that's going to be able to stifle the Buckeyes the way that Penn State did at certain points. So I want to see what they're able to do inside the 20 and if they're able to get out of those drives with 6s and 7s instead of 3s.
So I guess the next question is, okay, it's Nebraska. It is it's going to be a full stadium because it's always a full stadium. It's Nebraska. They're at 300 and whatever straight games. How important is it for Ohio State to get the crowd out? Every time we've been there before for a game, they are in the middle of the second quarter or sometimes late in the first quarter. How important is it to get the crowd out of the game today? While you're answering that, Tony, I'm going to check the weather. See if the it sound my last time I checked, the weather did not anticipate was not expected to be a factor, but we'll see if that has changed. But Tony, the crowd there. I mean that's a stadium that can get loud.
It is, and it's a stadium that is dying for a win like this, and they haven't had one in a while. So even an 11 a.m. local kick for them, they're going to be dialed in. They're used to these noon kickoffs, so it's nothing new for them. But this is an opportunity for them to impact the game. And when you see the team struggling to finish, I think there's maybe the crowd takes some ownership here and tries to just will things for the team and just stay in it as long as they can. But how long can they actually stay in it? And I'm not talking about Nebraska, I'm talking about the fans. How long can they stay in it? How many times can they get up after a bad play or getting knocked down? And it feels like they are the 12th man in this one. And maybe not just the 12th man, maybe the 10th and the 11th as well. Because if they can just stay in it and make things difficult for CJ Stroud, just continue to build that wave of momentum, anything like that to just play. As we've seen, Nebraska needs as much help as they can. Unfortunately, they need it in the fourth quarter more so than the first quarter. And we know the crowd will be there in the first. We don't know if it'll be there in the fourth.
And the forecast for today in Lincoln, it looks like it's going to be kind of low to mid 50s. No rain, no real serious winds, but yeah, it's doesn't look like a doesn't look like the weather's going to be a factor. The Do we have the availability report yet, or is that
We
not
do
out yet?
not. We do
Not yet.
not.
Okay. Okay. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Um, you know, the Ohio State defense, I talked to Ross Fulton about this for the morning show for this morning. They looked better last, they did against Oregon, but slightly better. They were giving up yards, but then they were getting stops in the red zone. They were kind of getting off the field when they needed to. They weren't getting beat as consistently as they did against Oregon. You know, is are they? What's a reasonable expectation for them today? I mean, Kevin, they have they're playing a team that can run the ball and can pass the ball, but has just been like absolutely snake bit. Like, what do you need to see out of the Ohio State defense today to feel like, okay, they're still kind of on the right track right now?
I want to see them get home. I want to see them be able to get out there and pressure Adrian Martinez. I want to see them be smart, though. They can't have him break contain. They have to, do you spy him? What do you do there? You can't let him go out and have 100-yard game. Um, I don't want to see a lot of big plays. I mean, if they complete some things in front of you, that's fine. But don't let them be able to take the top off of the defense and go deep. I mean, make them earn every yard that they get, and then really be able to stiffen up inside the 20s. I mean, if they get that far, and I think that Nebraska's going to score some points, but I certainly don't think that I'm expecting to see them get into the 20s. I have them at 14, but getting home, not letting Adrian Martinez beat you with his legs, and getting guys to the ground. I mean, I think that's always one of the things that it's so simplistic. Is tackling important? Yes, tackling's important. Be able to get these guys down to the ground. Finish off plays, and I guess as I continue my long laundry list of things defensively, I want to see how they respond without Steel Chambers in the first half. I mean, they lose a little bit more depth at linebacker. Is this going to end up being a Palaie Naote game because of just only being down to 4 guys at this point if you're not playing Reed Carrico? So what does that look like?
Yeah, that's kind of one of the big questions. It feels like he's kind of taking on a bigger and bigger role to the point where maybe he's going to win the starting job at some point. That just sort of feels like that's a trajectory that he's on right now. Tony, that's something you brought up last week. He started the second half. You kind of wonder if that meant he's maybe ready to take over at least a bigger role, if not just assume the starting role there. When he's in there, what does that do for them? Why, if they're closer to making that kind of move, what are they seeing out of Steel Chambers that would make them want to make that move?
Well, I think they're seeing what everybody else sees, and when he's in there, good stuff happens, and points don't. And I mentioned it before. When he was in the game, Ohio State gave up 3 points. When he wasn't, last week they gave up 21 or 20? Yeah, I think 21. So, granted, he was only in there for half of the first half, so that's fewer opportunities. But when he's out there, good things happen. Plays get made, and it's really, I think it's difficult to ignore that. And you got to start figuring. Like, I wonder what would happen if we just played him 2/3 of the time or 3/4 of the time, and how much better would the defense be? How much better would the tackling be? And really, I don't know that Taraji Mitchell is playing poorly. I don't think he is. But when one guy is playing better than good, then maybe you go with that guy more. And really, there's supposed to be no drop off between guys that they shuffle in. And I don't know that it's a drop off, it's a drop up, kind of, if that's an actual thing when Steel Chambers comes in. And yeah, you don't want to. Taraji Mitchell's been waiting forever. And so he's a captain. Everybody loves him. And so you're not just going to sit him on the bench. But it's not. I mean, it's easy to wonder. Like, I wonder what this defense would be if Steel Chambers is playing 85% of the snaps. I don't know that we'll find out until maybe the postseason. Like, maybe at that point they're going to be like, we've got to give ourselves the best opportunity here. And sorry, Taraja, but this is what we've got to do.
Old Toby had an interesting question there, and it's one that I think I agree with. And when we did our bold prediction show earlier in the week, I had Ohio State picking up a lot of sacks this weekend. Kevin, the defensive ends for Ohio State, it feels like now that Tyreek Smith's back, they're kind of coming along. You're seeing JT Tuimoloau. Tony had a great stat on Tuimoloau this week about 4 straight games with a tackle for loss, first Buckeye defensive lineman since Chase Young. to do that, which if you're anytime you're the first one since Chase Young to do anything, that's like, oh,
Yeah.
interesting. You know, is this a game where you can see the Ohio State defensive line maybe taking over defensive ends?
Sure, why not? I mean, they're due. I mean, if you sit there and you play the game of, well, this hasn't necessarily really happened, so they're due. I mean, they're plenty talented. I mean, it's not that they're devoid of having guys that can do it. It's just that it hasn't been done on the regular. And I think every game that Tyreek Smith gets a little bit healthier, I think every game that JT, I don't want to get the family mad at me, and Jack Sawyer get some more reps, get a little bit older, make that move from being a high school star into a collegiate player. I think that there is the capability of doing that. I mean, Nebraska certainly has a good but not a great line, so there's opportunity there. Plus, too, Adrian Martinez is the type of quarterback that's going to run around and keep plays alive. So the longer you keep a play alive, the longer there's more opportunity to be able to get him down to the ground, and those things are going to end up being called sacks. So I think that the numbers could end up being even a little inflated just due to the style of quarterback that they're playing.
And there was a question in the chat a minute ago about CJ Stroud, and CJ Stroud just looking kind of antsy, looking a little nervous, maybe just being a little off, basically in certain games. And you saw that earlier in the year. I mean, there it is, Roto COD. Some of my buddies say they have major concerns with CJ in big games. I don't agree. What do you guys think? I mean, he was definitely off at times at the beginning of the season. First half of the Minnesota game, he didn't look right. There were points in the Tulsa game where he didn't look quite right. He was doing the shoulder thing earlier in the year. You haven't seen him do that in a few weeks, have you? I mean, how much of last week, Tony, do you chalk up to CJ Stroud might be a little antsy in big games versus, hey, that's a pretty good defense they're playing?
I think it's a little bit of both, because it would be, I couldn't blame any quarterback for being a little antsy in that game last week. It's a big game. It's a night game. It's a big atmosphere. Even something as simple as you're wearing new uniforms. I mean, that just adds into this is not normal. And so this is something special. Don't screw this up. And then also, yes, you're playing the best secondary you've seen, some of the best pass rushing you've seen, certainly the best linebackers you've seen. So I think both of those combine to create some issues. And he still completed 65% of his passes, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, like 304, 305 yards passing. So there was some slow moments early on. And that's one thing I'm watching for today. Will there be some more of those? Because it's a crazy atmosphere, crazy environment. It's a big game. It's a road game. And again, he is still this is what, his 7th? He's got 7 starts now under his belt. So, it used to be like back in the day, quarterbacks could be a 2-year starter and people would be like, yeah, but he's still only a junior. He's still only a sophomore. And now it's like, isn't he just a robot at this point? And it's like, because he's like 19 years old and he's still learning and he's still growing and he's really good, but he's only going to get better. And it's not like, I don't think does anybody want CJ Stroud to be a finished product at this point? Because that means he's not going to get any better. And he's pretty good right now, but imagine what he's going to be next year and in the future. And so, yeah, I think that it's unreasonable to ask him to be this good this early. This is where he is. So now, as I wrote on Friday, judged by what he's done, what he has done, rather than early in the season, he's being judged by what Justin Fields and Dwayne Haskins did, which was completely unfair to him. But at least now, when he's a little slow or a little jittery against Penn State, you're like, well, he's been better. We've seen him be better. And now we'll see what he looks like today, and I guess compare him to how he started against Penn State.
Yeah, your point is well taken there, because I think you've seen a lot of the quarterback position just get sped up. Normally, guys would stay there 2-3 years, and then if they weren't a starter, they'd transfer. Right now, it's like, you hear guys months after they show up, you start hearing rumors that, well, if he's not starting, he may transfer. Like, I mean, that's the one side of it, but the other side of it is if you're used to seeing true freshmen come in or redshirt freshmen come in and just take over an offense, it's like, well, what's wrong with this guy if he's not a finished product as a redshirt freshman? Like, well, you're still, he had a weird true freshman year, and then had missed some time in camp with the shoulder thing. They called it load management, but I think that we've sort of figured out that it was not just regular old load management. It was give him some time off because he had some shoulder issues. Tony, yes, drinking his Mountain Dew Zero. Good job. I think we do need to address the elephant in the room.
Product placement.
It's somebody's birthday today. Tony, do you know whose birthday it is today?
Well, it's not mine. Happy birthday, Tom?
Almost. The correct answer is it's lots of people's birthdays. Everyone has a birthday every day. It's not a big deal. Let's move on. Kevin, there was a question earlier about Matt Jones at left guard. And, does he make the offense better when he's in at left guard? Is he better? Does he open up the run game better? Is he just a better guard than Thayer Munford, who is, more of a tackle right now? They're playing 4 tackles across the offensive line. What are your thoughts? Should they be playing more Matt Jones at left guard? Is the offensive line better with Matt Jones in at left guard, or is that, it's a size thing too, where he has not played nearly as much left guard as Thayer Munford has this year.
You need to have Matt Jones out there. I think Matt Jones certainly has earned the playing time, but that's the situation when you have 6 offensive linemen that should be starting in your own. Unless you're Minnesota and playing 7 of them a lot of times, what are you going to do? So, yeah, I thought that the move of Thayer Munford inside was a little bit of an odd one. He's an all-conference, all-America type caliber tackle, but then what do you do with Nick Petit-Frere? He has to stay out at tackle, and they decided, and DeJuan Jones needs to play. So you do that to get DeJuan Jones out there. So that leaves one of the 2 guard positions or center, and I guarantee you that Thayer Munford's a better guard than center. But I think Matt Jones, it's a more natural position for him, and there's something to be said. Thayer Munford is an incredible athlete. He's an incredible offensive lineman, but he may not have the ceiling at guard that Matt Jones does, because that's a position that Matt Jones knows. So I'm normally one who's very anti-shuffling offensive line. Offensive line has to perform as one unit. It's one unit out there, and any interruptions and disruptions, that doesn't help the cause. But I think that there's certainly, you don't want to get to the point where you're tipping your pitches and it's like, oh, well, Matt Jones is in. This is going to be a run series. And, oh, this is going to happen here. This is going to be a pass series. Obviously you can't do that, and you're not going to be running guys in from play to play, I hope. But I think there's a lot of validity in what the comment was about them maybe being a little bit better in certain aspects with Matt Jones out there.
Tom, I would just like to step in.
And I was gonna tell Kevin to be realistic, because what kind of idiot would have, say, a running quarterback and a passing quarterback that they were shuffling in and out? Tony, would you like to promote our Michigan Monday episode that's coming up on Monday, or?
Yeah, if you want to, we do a Michigan Monday podcast every Monday where we talk a lot the 5-star throwing quarterback, the 5-star arm quarterback to run the ball, and then Cade McNamara, the lesser quarterback. They bring them in depending on what they need to do. If they need a running quarterback, they throw in J.J. McCarthy. But that's neither here nor there. It does take me back to the John Cooper days when option and Kirk Herbstreit dropped back to pass. And I think what's to say ever, and that's a good description of it. I just real quick on the offensive line, I think we have to blame Greg Stadrella here for recruiting too well and developing too well. Tom,
if you'd like to leave the comments, Tony is the one in the middle. If you have any comments on Tony's thoughts there, I guess one of the other stories we got to talk about today is Jack Miller not on the trip, backup quarterback for Ohio State. Got arrested for OVI in Columbus on Friday, suspended from the team. So that means that Quinn Ewers made the travel squad this weekend. He is third on the depth chart. You got CJ Stroud, you got Kyle McCord, you got Quinn Ewers. This is a game that I expect to be close enough that it probably won't. Ewers probably won't play. A couple injuries. I would expect this game that this is not going to be Ohio State 50-7 again like it was before. But Tony just absolutely stirring things up in the chat. Good job. Is this this is I guess we're going to look at this as me trying to find a silver lining to a not great situation involving Jack Miller. Is this ultimately something that maybe helps Quinn Ewers' developmental? Ewers a little bit feeling more comfortable at Ohio State, feeling like there's more of an opportunity, more of an immediate path to the playing field. I mean, you don't want to look at it like that necessarily because it's OVI is a serious situation, but in terms of the football team and the football team on-field product alone, Tony, is this something that potentially makes Quinn Ewers' path to the field a little bit easier?
I think it removes a piece of the puzzle, and I guess that's a bad analogy because you don't want to remove pieces of the puzzle because then you can't put it all together. It removes somebody in line ahead of him, and that's a pathway of light to the field. And I don't know if it happens this week. Could it happen next week against Michigan State? That maybe Purdue would be the best opportunity other than the Michigan game, obviously. But I don't think it's not. I still think he's going to see. He's still, when he looks forward and doesn't see Jack Miller, he still sees Kyle McCord. So it may still be up to what Kyle McCord decides. This is football terminology only. Like, this gives Quinn Ewers a little bit of a leg up, and it provides more of an opportunity. But that's just one small step, and now there's other bigger steps. And again, ultimately, it just comes down to how patient is he going to be, and what kind of recruiting is going on behind the scenes, both with Ohio, the kind of recruiting that's not supposed to happen between other teams, and contacts within his sphere that happens everywhere, and perhaps is happening there, and what kind of feedback everybody's getting. But I know that it moves the needle a little bit. You can see the needle moving, but it's still way over on the whatever is the bad side.
And Chris asked a question a second ago about go back to Chris's last question.
Which one? I'll find it.
The one right before this one. He was asking, it has now completely flown directly out of my mind. We're going to talk about Sue's question about which games we want to see. We're most interested to see.
He said Miller will transfer now.
No.
Then I see him going to ASU.
No, before that.
Then he talked about his games. I'm scrolling through.
Oh, you know what? It wasn't him. It was someone else. He said it was someone Russell, Jeffrey Russell, something like that, who talked about wanting, this better be a blowout today. There it is. Jeffrey Russell, we better blow them out. Now, I mean, Kevin, this is a team that hasn't lost. Nebraska has lost. They have plenty of experience losing games. They've lost 6 games this year in 9 tries, but they've never lost by more than one score. The biggest blowout that they had was 8 points against Illinois week 0. Is this a team that you can blow out? I mean, what does it take to blow Nebraska out?
Putting up significantly more points than them. I mean, I think you can blow this team out. I just think it's a matter of that. I don't have their schedule in front of me. I mean, the game that really rings through to me is the 23-20 overtime win over Michigan State. But, and obviously you had Oklahoma, but it was an Oklahoma team that was playing Spencer Rattler and not Caleb Williams. I think that this team has played well enough to win a lot of its games, but I don't think that I sit there and look at Nebraska and say, okay, this is a team that's going out there and playing A-, even B+ football much of the time. I think a lot of it is I don't know, do teams that play against Nebraska, do they just kind of play down to their competition? And that's not me saying that this is the Nebraska team, as Tom said, that's going to lose 56-7. But I think this team, at some point, 6 losses by 8 points or less is just going to weigh on them to a point, and they're just going to come out and just kind of lay an egg. And this very well could be that game. If Ohio State comes out gets the ball, scores, forces a 3-and-out, or forces a very short series, gets the ball and scores, and it's 14-0. I could see this Nebraska team wilting, and I could see 56-7 at that point. I don't think that's the script we're going to get, but I wouldn't be shocked.
I'm going back and looking at their past games, just the last 3 seasons. They've lost games by more than 2 touchdowns 5 times in the last 3 seasons. All of the other losses by 1 score or less. 2 of those 5 losses have been to Ohio State. The 2 real blowouts have been to Ohio State. The other big loss last year was 41-23 to Illinois. And I don't know, and Nebraska, but it's just not great for the Huskers. But Ohio State beat them 52-17 last year, and in 2019, I believe it was 48-7. Yeah, 48-7, and they had a 34-7 loss at Minnesota and a 37-21 loss to Wisconsin. Other than that, for the last 3 years, all of their losses have been by 1 score, and it's a fine line between a really good, an Iowa or Minnesota or Wisconsin type season for Nebraska the last 3 years, instead of the Purdue, Illinois type season they continue to have. So while I don't know how you necessarily go in and plan on blowing these guys out, Ohio State has done it at least the last 2 times. I'll probably go back, and we know there's a lot of blowouts with Ohio State in this series, and so they obviously have the key to it, but it's going to come down to execution, and really maybe that's what it is. It's one team executes, the other doesn't, and they do it for 4 quarters. They both do what they do for 4 quarters, and then you get the result.
Sue had a question earlier about, well, first of all, there was a question about Quinn Ewers and his black stripe, and I was trying to remember, has Quinn Ewers lost his black stripe yet? I don't feel like he has.
I don't remember him losing it, but that doesn't. I'm 50. I don't remember much anymore, so I don't know.
He knew it yesterday, but he forgotten it already today.
Kevin gets cranky when he hasn't had dinner yet. It's almost dinner time for Kevin. From Sue, other than Ohio State, what game are you guys most interested in watching? For me, this is a very easy one. Michigan State coming off of a big win, huge win over Michigan, going to West Lafayette, the place where hopes and dreams and seasons die. I mean, is every even if you didn't know, like, hey, Michigan State was a little vulnerable in the pass defense last week, and David Bell's pretty good at catching footballs and running with them. Even if you didn't have that context, like, everything about this game is just like red sirens all the way down. Like, oh, no, Sparty. Just get your Sparty no tweet typed out now and get ready to send it, because you're going to need it this afternoon. Tony, am I wrong there?
No, and I think the best thing for Michigan State is that everybody is expecting this, and I don't know how self-aware they are, but they would also have to, like, you know what? We've been, well, they haven't really been in this situation. These players haven't. So this is the best thing they've ever known. So those poor fools. But the adults in the room, the coaches and all of that, certainly they prepared these guys. Purdue beating Iowa maybe is the best thing that could have happened for Michigan State, and that they've already seen the snake strike, and so they know not to touch it, and they know, like, this stove is hot and all of those analogies you want to use. But this is like a trap, a box trap, and on the side of the box trap is written box trap, and then there's a sign pointing to the box trap that says warning box trap, and then you've got Michigan State walking up and like, ooh, cheese.
Yes, the Acme State Spartans. They're gonna, Tony, I have a feeling they're gonna catch the Roadrunner this year. Don't let them play UTSA in a bowl game. That's I think my big takeaway. Troy says Nebraska has been such a disappointment since they came into the league. I thought we were getting a traditional power to make the Big Ten better. Instead, we got a slightly different version of Rutgers. That's probably a little harsh. They haven't been Rutgers bad, but and also, again, I have said this before, that is my favorite road trip. I love going to that campus. It's a great school. It's a great town. It's a great, like, the stadium's awesome. The experience is awesome. There's tons of great traditions there. Like, I will, Nebraska I don't think is ever going to go back to being the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s Nebraska. But if they go back to being 10, which I think is very realistic with the right coach hire, I think that's, I mean, Kevin, Nebraska is not a completely lost cause, are they?
Well, here's the problem for them. They had farther to fall. So because of the gap of how far they've fallen, it feels worse. I mean, it feels like they're a bigger disappointment because they were a team out there winning national championships and dominating the Big 8 and even maybe some moments early in the Big 12 before it really became the Texas and Oklahoma League. So, and then there's Rutgers, who had a small window of time in Shiano 1.0, and then, when it fell back into obscurity pre-Shiano 2.0, we sit there and see a 2-9, 2-10 type of team, depending on how far back we're going and how many games are being played. I mean, I could go on and on about how Nebraska doesn't have a natural recruiting area. I mean, it can't recruit Texas and Oklahoma the way it did when it played in the Big 12 because just where you're playing. They certainly have had some questionable hires at coaches prior to Frost, which, we're still questioning that one, and post Frank Solich. I think we saw once again a school thinking that it was more than it was when they're like, we can do so much better than what Frank Solich is doing. And then they get rid of Frank Solich and they fall to earth. Minnesota, we're so much better than Glenn Mason. We can do so much better than this. And then, they hire a bunch of, puds until they get to PJ Fleck, who they just rewarded with a contract through 2028 that he'll never see the end of. No, Nebraska is not Rutgers, but Nebraska, from the lofty perch that it may have been at one day to where it is now, that is a much further fall than anywhere that Rutgers was to where Rutgers was at the bottom of its bender.
The Frank Solich thing, Tom, real quick, if I can jump in, I feel bad because he was being at the end, and yes, you never want to follow the legend, but he was also the victim of the end of option football, the birth of modern football, and how, it's time to move on to the modern game. And just going back when I was in college, like you just go into a season knowing Nebraska's not losing this year. There's nobody better than Nebraska. They're just a machine. They do this. And then when Arizona State beat them in '96, it was like, holy cow, I can't believe this happened. But then, this is also the time that Joe Tiller is coming into the Big Ten, and you've got Hal Mummy and Kentucky, where things were just modernizing, and then you see the kind of Nebraska reacting to that by going to Bill Callahan. We're going to throw the ball, and I just think the timing. If it was still Tom Osborne and he was 15 years younger, I think he was going to end up the same way that Frank Solich did. He probably would have been able to withstand it because he was he wasn't Frank Solich, but I don't think the results would have been any different.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought because you do have to you do have to adapt as the game changes. I mean, you're seeing that there are teams that, the stuff that worked magically 10 years ago. I mean, just ask Rich Rodriguez how that works. Like, Rich Rodriguez was a game-changing, offensive mind that unlike anything that the college football world had ever seen. And then, now Rich Rodriguez is the offensive coordinator at, I believe, ULM. I believe he's down there with Terry Bowden. And, that's, you have to, it's adapt or die, basically. And, Nebraska had enough of a head start that, they're not going to turn into Rutgers. But, if Tom Osborne was, to your point, born 15 years later, they probably end up as the sort of 10-win Nebraska that they were kind of in the 2010, 2012, around the time they came into the Big Ten. Someone raised the point that Nebraska has been into Indianapolis more than Michigan has, which, I mean, that's really not much of an achievement, but it's true. They have, at the beginning of when they first came to the Big Ten, they absolutely did. They were in the Big Ten championship game a couple times. The other, the schematic piece that Tony talked about is one part of it. Nebraska also traditionally has gotten a lot of the recruits from West Coast and Texas, like California, Texas, where a lot of those Nebraska kids came from, and not playing 3 games in Texas every year because you're not in the Big 12 anymore. You stop getting so many of those Texas recruits. I think that's part of the issue as well. Sage wants to know: would you put a spy on Martinez or play your base defense, Kevin?
Oh boy, I would probably.
Your enthusiasm is unmatched.
Well, I just don't know I don't know what to expect out of the defense from week to week. I mean, this isn't like a lot of past years to where it's like, all right, just just wind up the defense and let them go, and just kind of what you're going to get. I don't know what I'm going to get out of them. I don't think that Nebraska is capable enough in terms of the diversity of its offense that you couldn't spy them most of the game. I mean, I probably would spy them. I mean, I'm a fantastic NC2A player on PlayStation, so I have a lot of expertise there. But Ross Fulton, I am not in terms of actual real scheming, but it sure sounds good to me about just saying to spy him, because I really think he's like that main weapon. And he's, as I said, he rushes 15, 18 times a game against Ohio State in the 3 previous matchups, and rushes for about 80 some yards and has four touchdowns on the ground through 3 games.
And you're seeing Nebraska run either a variant of the triple option. They'll run it out of the pistol or something like that, but it is still. Chris says our spy is out till the second half, and that's true. I think Steel Chambers might be the guy you would put in that role. You could put someone else. They could put Ronnie Hickman in that role if they wanted to, but you put someone in that role. You're seeing Nebraska run I formation stuff now this year. We saw that 2 years ago. They were down by 1 million in the second quarter, and then they just came out and ran like an old school I formation Nebraska triple option drive, and it was like I'm sitting up in the press box going, "Ooh, this is just like when I was a kid. Oh boy!" And you're seeing a little bit of that now. They still will have like a fullback in there, and they'll run like the triple. And I mean, it's as someone who grew up in like 1980s and 1990s college football, like that's fun. That's awesome. Is that? I mean, do you get that same sense when you're watching Nebraska run the option? It's like, oh man, that's a lot of fun to watch that to happen again. It's like you're going back in time.
It is fun to watch. I don't know how fun it is to prepare for. You go back to what Nick Saban said like a couple years ago, that one day in the very near future, like there's only going to be a couple coaches still option, and the triple option is gonna make a comeback, and it's going to do wonders in the game, and the offenses are going to score a bunch of points just with the triple option because nobody is accustomed to stopping it. But it is fun to watch, and especially out of the I formation, and you don't get to see it, so it's a little bit of a treat. It's like anytime when Navy or Army or Air Force is playing a team that you're planning on watching, and it's like, this is nice. Or you just see some random Sun Belt game where you've got 2 teams that run crazy spreads with options, and it's like, okay, I can get into this. And there is fun to it, and there is a little bit of throwback to it, but does it make it even better when it is Nebraska, when you're like, okay, this all makes sense? And I this brings back some memories. I don't know how many good memories it brings back because Nebraska was just killing people, but when they did lose, it was a big deal, and it's like, okay, as an Ohio State fan back in the day, you're like, the Buckeyes have a chance.
Yeah, one of my first weeks at Ohio State in September of 1996, they lost like a real late night game to Arizona State, like 19-7. And it was like, what? What? What do you mean Nebraska lost to Arizona State? Because those were Nebraska teams that I think the year or two before had beaten Arizona State by 60 points or something, and that was what Nebraska was, and then all of a sudden it wasn't. There was a question in there earlier about how Nebraska used to sort of circumvent the NCAA scholarship rules, where they would have a walk-on scholarship for each county in the state, which then, okay, so, Nebraska has a walk-on program, which, you still hear people talking about that. Well, if you have a walk-on scholarship, well, then you actually have a bunch more scholarships. And they use Prop 48 They took Prop 48 players when that was a thing, and used that to kind of advance their program as well. So there was, Tom Osborne was very good at working within the rules, perhaps let's push this wall out a few feet this way. And Ezekiel, strong disagree. Let's push this wall out a little bit. Let's give ourselves a little bit more room. I'm going to smash your mouth, Tony Gerdeman. You could sort of work within the wall, within the room, within the rules, but push things a little bit in one direction or another. Their strength program was sort of ahead of its time. And when I say strength program, I mean literally the strength program, and also you can assume that I'm making air quotes when I say strength program. So they were a little ahead of their time in some ways there as well. So there was a lot of reasons that Nebraska was a little bit ahead of its time, and ahead of the achieving more than you would expect a school from a relatively small, not particularly populated state. So Ezekiel says he's always thought he's all right. Listen. These comments, they have to stop right now. I'm gonna turn this thing on. I'm gonna turn this podcast around, and we're gonna go home. So yeah, it is. Nebraska definitely not quite what they were before, but I'm with you there, Tony. I mean, it is a it's a program where, just like the uniforms, the stadium, the fans, the traditions, the tunnel walk, the balloons after the first touchdowns. I mean, all of those things. I still get the warm Nebraska feeling. Like if I had to pick a second favorite Big Ten team, I would say Nebraska. If it was that's just a fun. It's a fun program. It's cool fans. It's a nice city. It's a cool stadium. I like all of it.
Well, remember too that they helped. They really took the first step last year in fighting for a season. I mean, Ohio State threw its weight in there, but it was Nebraska that came in first and said, we're playing. And I mean, they even, there was one of the little small Tennessee schools was going to be, it wasn't UT Chattanooga, but it was like UT Martin or somebody that they were going to set up a game with. And I mean, I think that there was a lot of camaraderie between Ohio State and Nebraska people during that point, and that's not going to disappear anytime soon. I think you're going to find a lot of people sympathetic to the Nebraska cause in Buckeye Nation just because of what happened in 2020.
And not just the people, but the head coaches. So if there is an opportunity for Ohio State to blow this one out, don't be surprised if Ryan Day shuts things down. Like he and Scott Frost grew pretty close last year trying to make football happen. And I don't think he'd want to repay him by being like a reason he gets fired or something like that. And so maybe there's some calling off of the dogs.
Ohio State analyst Scott Frost.
But at the same time, Ohio State needs as many points as they can get. And no, the committee is not supposed to look at point differential and win margins, but they do. Unless it's Alabama, then they just look at the pretty helmets. And
they just look at Alabama.
I'm just looking through our board right now to see if there are any additional questions. Harry wants to know, how do Nebraska's defensive backs compare to Penn State's defensive backs? I mean, Tony, Nebraska's defense is much better than it has been in the past, but I don't think they have just the athletes that Penn State has in the back end of that defense. And you can also, I'm sure the unanswered question here is, or unasked question here is Tyreek Johnson. Remember Tyreek Johnson? Is he playing much for Nebraska this year? You can share that as well.
Yeah, no, he is not. Don't know that he's playing at all. No stats put up by Tyreek Johnson. I think we all agree Cam Taylor-Britt is very good defensive back, can play anywhere probably. But Penn State's secondary is back. In terms of pass efficiency defense, Penn State's number 2 in the Big Ten. Nebraska is number 9, so that gives you some sort of an idea. Nebraska with 8 interceptions in 9 games. So they can't pull from the same talent pool, so their own talent pool isn't as deep as Penn State, who is probably starting 3 NFL players in their secondary right now, and I don't know that Nebraska is. But like Tom said, Nebraska's defense made some strides, and it's certainly better than it has been. They've gotten some of the black shirts back, so that's always a positive thing. But if they can just protect C.J. Stroud, Kevin, I think they're going to be able to throw for their usual. And is that 310? Is it 410? Somewhere in that range.
It's going to be more than 10. I'll say that. I mean, 310, 410. It's probably not going to be 10 or 110. And it's going to be a really angry hornet's nest if it's 210, unless they rush for about 310. But yeah, I think that Ohio State, certainly has to be aware of Cam Taylor-Britt out there, has to be aware of JoJo Domann. They have to be aware of some of these players. I mean, patience is not something that we have anymore in terms of coaching, especially in college football, just because of how, there are just these monstrous expectations. I mean, and we could be looking at one of the worst programs, which Nebraska certainly isn't, and there's still expectations of, well, we should at least be 6-6. Well, you won like one game in like the last 6 years, so slow your roll. But, they're starting to get some guys there. I just think that they're just a couple of key positions. They don't have the right guys, and one of them is quarterback. And I don't mean to be hijacking the conversation there, but this isn't even an Adrian Martinez thing. This is why can't they have a backup quarterback? Why can't they keep a number 2? Why are the McCaffreys of the world leaving the program? I mean, you have such this huge chasm between where Adrian Martinez may be and what Logan Smothers may be, and I didn't know that there was a third Smothers brother. I don't even know who this cat is, and supposedly the gap is so wide between them that it's not even an option. And if you believe the rumors that Taylor Martinez has his jaw wired shut, I mean, holy hell, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, that's a crazy one. We were talking about that last night. I'm not 100% sure I believe that. That feels like, has Taylor Martinez not done interviews the last 3 to 5 weeks? It feels like you would have noticed that. That's a little question. I thought this was an interesting one from Tyler. Who scores a touchdown first, Cade Stover or Emeka Egbuka? I have an immediate answer on that, but Tony, what do you think?
My immediate answer is Emeka Egbuka, and it could come this week. You got to figure. I should look to see how many of Nebraska's kickoffs go into the end zone for touchbacks. But if we're all thinking Nebraska scores 3 or 4 times in this game, and there's also an opening or a halftime kick, he's going to have some opportunities there. And so he's going to have some opportunities, maybe not a lot, but a few in the on offense. Just looking here, Nebraska with 52 kickoffs on the year, 34 touchbacks. So is that because they could touch back every time they want and sometimes they don't? Because I think against Ohio State, they're probably, if they can, they're going to put it in the end zone every single time. They're going to want to touch back every single time because they don't want they're not going to try to, let's kick it to the 3 and let's try to pin Ohio State at the 15. I don't know that that's necessarily a safe thing when you've got when you're kicking to the guy leading the Big Ten in kickoff returns, even though he only gets like 1 or 2 opportunities a game, and I think none last week. So maybe keep the ball away from him. But even though, Tom, this is the year of the tight end, and maybe we're both way off, and maybe Kevin has a different answer, but I immediately go to Emeka Egbuka because it's only a matter of time, and we've now gone 8 games or whatever. It's even more only a matter. It's like it's more likely now than ever, and next week it'll be even more likely. Like, it has to happen at some point this season.
Well, you look at the Akron game where he had the 85-yard reception and then like tackled to the 3 or whatever, and he's had a couple kickoffs where it's like, oh man, this might be it, and he's come close. It feels like Cade Stover throwing to the second tight end in the red zone, like that's like it's almost a trick play. You're almost relying on them to run a trick play for Cade Stover to score. Kevin, I saw your thoughts on the Christmas music question from Brady. Has anyone started listening to Christmas music? Kevin sounds like he is a firm no on that.
No, I mean, but it's just a matter of time until I'm in the car with my wife and she has Holly or whatever, the channels from, that on Sirius XM that are the Christmas music channels. So it's coming. Sources have told me that the Noon household will have its Christmas tree up by tomorrow. It sounds like already. So we'll see.
I hope it's not a real tree because I don't know if that's going to work all that well. That might not last till Christmas if it's a real Christmas tree. Tony, are you a Christmas music or right after Halloween person?
No, 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 no. Unless it's grandma got run over by a reindeer, because that's always been a child. It was a childhood favorite. And anytime that came on the car, the radio would go, "Let's crank that radio up." And but other than that, and in fact, I actually did listen to that within the last week, just when I was a child, and it is.
You kind of cut out there. Did you say you listened to it in the last week?
I did. Mhm. Just
So
just to
then
check in on it.
the answer to are you listening to Christmas music yet would
No,
be
no,
no.
that's not Christmas music. That's reindeer music.
I don't consider that Christmas music because that music plays all year round. So I don't consider that Christmas music.
Can
Yeah,
we
that's
all
what.
agree on the best Christmas song? And that's the dogs barking jingle bells. That is by far the best Christmas song.
I think you're gonna get more consensus on the worst Christmas song, and that song is "Christmas Shoes." Any
Oh,
I don't
disagreement at
even.
all there?
I don't even
No.
know what that is.
It is a song about a boy who goes to a store to buy shoes for his mother for Christmas because she is dying. It's like, you know what? I don't need that. I don't need that at Christmas. Yeah. It's yeah, no. That's not I think you may have missed the entire point of the season.
That's horrible. I mean, I'm already depressed about getting old, and now you almost have me in tears, dude. Jeez, what the hell? I mean, I thought the gift of the Magi or whatever. Oh, I bought you combs for your beautiful hair. I cut off my hair to
Hmm.
buy you
Hmm.
crank. I don't even remember that story that well. I mean, god
I
dang.
don't think it was Crank. I don't think it was
I was just modernizing it for y'all.
yes. Um, Harry says, besides Martinez running the RPO, who else in Nebraska's offense should Ohio State key in on? Kevin, you do your in-depth reporting on the opponent every week. So who else? Who are some other names to know? I mean, there was a question earlier about who is Denzel Burke going to have to shut down this week. What are some names that people should know this week?
Yeah, I'm pulling up because they have the Montana transfer at wide receiver, Torre. Let me
Hmm.
receiving Samori Torre, who's 29 catches, 568, 3 touchdowns. They have a very talented tight end in Austin Allen, who's second on the team with 27 catches. He's got a couple of scores. Omar Manning is their third guy at receiver, and then at running back, it's mostly Adrian Martinez who's doing it, but Ramir Johnson, he's got 96 carries for 448 and 4 scores. Between him and Martinez, 15 of their rushing touchdowns come from those two. But, Torre is really going to be the guy that I'm going to want to see what Denzel Burke is going to be able to do against him, because I think that's going to be the battle. And if Burke gets the better of him early, once again, the conversation that we had 5-10 minutes ago about does Ryan Day call off the dogs at a certain point, we could be exploring that at that point.
And I think Torrey was a junior college transfer, and they were expecting big things from him. He has three 100-yard receiving games this season. Two of those were just two catches. Like, so he had two catches for 108 against Northwestern, two for 136 against Buffalo. So he is like a big play guy. Has just three catches in the last 3 weeks. One catch for 1 yard against Minnesota, two for 47 last week against Purdue. So while he is this big play guy and has this potential, be almost non-existent. He has a catch every week so far this season, but certainly a guy you got to be wary of. But it's not like he's Johnson against or whatever. But I guess maybe he could be that this week against somebody. I wouldn't expect it against Denzel Burke though.
Super chat from Jeff. Let's pump the brakes on blowout talk after Penn State. I mean, I have them winning by 14, so I'm not exactly picking a blowout. Tony, I think had them by Ohio State by 17, and
Mm-hmm.
Kevin by 21, right? So
Yeah.
I don't think any of us are really picking blowouts. I mean, Ohio State I think is pretty clearly a better team, more talented team than Nebraska is, and Nebraska has found ways to lose, and playing a team that is substantially better than you are, and you're turning the ball over, and you're all week I've kind of been positing that this is a Scott Frost has to win this game to really secure his job kind of game, and into the center of the table a little more than he would during a normal game. So you may see more going for it on fourth down. You may see more if you're down, you got to throw it into windows you wouldn't necessarily be throwing it into, and it can kind of snowball there if that doesn't go well. So I think if they lose, if Ohio State wins by a bunch, that's probably how it happens. But yeah, I'm picking Ohio State to win by 14, which is, I don't think, anywhere close to a blowout
or a cover even for those
Yeah.
degenerates out there.
There's it is just Christmas music all the way down right now in the
I was
in
going
the
to say, I've
chat.
got like 20 questions in the queue from earlier that I can kind of start throwing up as well.
I'm gonna throw in one more, just an all-time Christmas classic. My wife, her dad made them a mixtape of Christmas music off of like a radio station at some point, and the last song on the tape, on one side of the tape, you only got the first like 15 seconds of it, but was a John Denver song called "Daddy, Please Don't Get Drunk This Christmas."
I've
I don't
heard
want
of
to see
this
my
song.
mama cry.
I've heard of that song.
She has never heard anything other than the first 15 seconds of that song, because then the tape ended, and then so that's it. So so that's there's some doozies out there. Kevin, let's get to some questions.
All right, as I'm looking up the questions, my second favorite Christmas songs behind Dogs Barking Jingle Bells is the Alvin and the Chipmunks song about wanting a hula hoop. I really like that one too. I mean, I don't need to hear it on repeat, and we don't have kids, so it's never been a case of that. So I can deal with it in small doses. And by Tom's reactions there, regardless of any time of the year, on the road, I'm going to start playing that one. When we're out eating, if there's touch tunes, I'm going to play it at the restaurant from my phone on repeat. I'm willing to take that financial hit.
Well, they don't know where we're eating from now on.
All right. How many Martinez turnovers today?
Tony?
Oh, I froze, so I have no idea what the question was.
It's on the screen.
How many?
I can't see it on my phone.
Oh God!
How many Adrian Martinez turnovers today, Tony?
How many Adrian Martinez turnovers today? I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep it conservative and only go with 2, which seems like a lot, but he can do so much worse. So I feel 2 is a good number. I'm not asking a lot from him. I'm not asking him for 3 or 4. I think 2 is sufficient. 2 should be all Ohio State needs to get the 17-point win that I am talking about. If he doesn't turn it over at all, this is probably, quite possibly a 4-quarter game and a game down into the second half of the fourth quarter. It's just, if Nebraska can just avoid shooting themselves in the foot or throwing the football at their own feet or whatever kind of analogy you want to use, combining those 2 things, then there's some possibilities. But we just haven't seen it. We haven't seen any proof that is possible. But so I'm going to say 2. Where's anybody else?
Well, I have Nebraska turning it over 3 times or more this week in our bowl. Turn it over at least 3 times. So that doesn't mean those are all Martinez, but you would think he's the most likely to be the one to turn it over. So I'll say 3. I'll say 3 for I almost call him Taylor Martinez, because boy, time travel is Kevin is not the only one. Kevin is not the only one who's getting old, apparently.
Yeah, Kevin already did do the Taylor Martinez once today, by the way.
Oh, did he? Oh, goodness, yeah.
And you missed it, Tom. So really, this is on you as well for missing it.
It's because I'm thrown off because both of your Wi-Fi has been very laggy. So I'm just.
You know what they say, Kevin? You run into one bad Wi-Fi in a day, and you run into a bad Wi-Fi. You run into 2, you keep running into bad Wi-Fis, and you're the bad Wi-Fi.
I'm not the bad Wi-Fi. I'm going to say that there's. I agree with Jordan Kapler about 3 turnovers as well. I think one of them is not a Martinez one. So sadly, I agree with Tony. I'll say that that he's responsible for 2, whether it's a pick and a fumble or 2 picks. That seems to be about the right number. Craig, with true or false, the Ohio State-Michigan game determines the East representative in Indianapolis.
So we're saying Michigan State loses again, or loses in addition to the Ohio State game?
Yeah, I mean that probably means, because Penn State, Michigan State is the same week as Ohio State, Michigan, and so that'll be at the same time or later. So you would need Michigan State to lose twice before then, and I mean, yeah, lose to Purdue, lose to Ohio State. And really the question then is, does Michigan win at Penn State? And I don't think that they do. I think there's a
Yeah.
possibility. I think there's a possibility that Ohio State has clinched the Big Ten East before the Ohio State-Michigan game. Because if Michigan State loses to Ohio State, Michigan loses to Penn State, everyone else in the division has two conference losses. Ohio State has none, so Ohio State would have it locked it up. So I'm going to say false on that one.
I agree. I'm going to say false just based on math and junk, that it's just not going to, that things are going to be locked up the week before. And it doesn't mean that there'll be any less meaning in the game and, all of the platitudes that are there, but I don't think it's going to determine. But one thing I feel pretty confident in saying, the only way that Jim Harbaugh and his team are going to be seeing a game in Indianapolis in December is with a ticket. So there you go.
Sign it college game day today at Cincinnati. Just says Gary Farda. Gerd, your thoughts?
I mean, and that's one of those that it could be a 6-year-old that wrote it, and it could be a 60-year-old that wrote it, and everywhere in between. I saw another one about a Gary in there, and I thought you were going to read that one, and I was going to have to say, please don't read that one.
No, I'm going to have to scroll through Twitter to find game day signs, apparently.
But yeah, Gary Farda, it's a classic. It's one that you can always go back to, and it's always apt.
Mm-hmm.
Mika Hanna hopes that our offensive line has a better game.
Yeah.
This is where everything starts, and it keeps the timing of the offense. If they could just eliminate the penalties, then I think everything else takes care of itself.
Yeah, there was a question earlier about, was it 6 false starts or procedure penalties last week on the offensive line at home, and is that a concern on the road? You haven't seen it on the road. You haven't seen it really at all this year. I think that was just last week, just nerves, and they were just, once it was like rolling the ball back, it was like it just looked off. The whole thing just looked off. Sue's making pecan pumpkin waffles and Canadian bacon for breakfast. So Sue, I guess we'll all be over for breakfast after this as soon as we're done with the show. But the whole line just looked wrong last week. It just looked off. You would think, they almost can't be that bad again because they haven't been that bad before. So I don't think there's any real reason to think that they're going to be that bad again.
All right, I've been dragged down the wormhole of people asking what I was going to be having for my meal today. I said I'm making a pot of chili, and then people are now anywhere from pizza rolls and a banana, whether or not that's what Ed's having, or maybe that was what Ed was assuming that I was having. And I do love some pizza rolls, the combo ones.
I was going to say, Kevin, I don't think Kevin needs bananas, so false.
No,
yeah,
occasionally.
Well, I think maybe this is Ed's breakfast. I think Sue threw her breakfast up there.
Well,
now
yeah.
Ed is putting his breakfast up there.
Well, I got a lot of this. See, yeah, there's DK asked the question about what's for breakfast, so that's kind of where we've gone. So once I get the next question going, I'll start punching through other people's answers. Ezekiel, Nebraska's been to Indy more times than Michigan, which again goes back to my statement. I've answered that question already. Edward believes the Buckeyes will win going away. Well, they're going to have to go away, or they're going to have to stay in Nebraska. But we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But Doug, on the other hand, says don't panic when we can't stop them on the first couple of possessions. We'll be close for a half. What do you guys think about that?
Tom.
I mean, Ohio State giving up a touchdown or a long drive to open the game is kind of the free space on the bingo card at this point. So, yeah, probably, possibly. Would that be at all a surprise? I would be more surprised and impressed if they got through the first quarter without Nebraska having a sustained drive, and if Nebraska has 0 points on the board. That would be far more surprising and impressing to me than it would be concerning if Nebraska.
Yeah, I'm with you. Sorry, I froze there. But if Nebraska starts out and can't do anything, I mean, have an impact, I think, throughout the rest of the game. Whereas if they score a couple, that's just how things go, and then eventually things start to collapse. But I don't know that Nebraska's been all that great in the first half because you watch their games and it's always like 13-17 at the half and with trading the lead or whatever. And so um, you do kind of expect Nebraska to march down the field on their first one. It's any subsequent marching down after that that is going to be the concern. And I have Nebraska scoring 24, so I mean I do expect them to score some points, but that's a 3 or 4 quarter thing, not a first half thing. I don't think if it's 24 points in the first half, boys, we're gonna have a barn burner.
Just to give people a quick update, I've seen a couple of people in the chat wondering about the availability report. That drops at 10:30 today, 10:30, so a little later than normal. So that's why we have not been discussing that stuff yet.
So I'm guessing we're going to be on till about 10:40, is what you're telling me, to try and
sounds like
I gotta go
like
stir my chili. I gotta go stir my chili here at some point, but we can.
I hope that's not a euphemism.
Oh boy. If I had a 2-box built, you would be in timeout right now. So,
there are a bunch of people asking about why Ohio State gives up. Dale says, "I'm frustrated when Buckeyes give up the first drive touchdown," and he says it's not acceptable to give up a first drive touchdown. The whole point of the first drive, and Day was asked about scripting plays and having stuff at the beginning of the game, and he talked about it and said essentially teams have spent all this time watching you on film. They're doing stuff to poke and prod at what they see on film and exploit the vulnerabilities and then see how you respond to what they're doing there and set you up. So it's not, he doesn't know. Day is not like the first play is going to be this and the second play is going to be this and the third play is going to be this, but they top of the game. Other teams are like that as well, where they know, hey, Ohio State has a vulnerability here, or the way Ohio State tends to always play the one high defense, pre-rotate their safeties at the start of the game. So therefore, we know this will work against that defense. We talk with Fulton all the time on the Morning Scoop about man beaters and zone beaters and routes or combinations of routes that are designed to beat certain coverages or whatever it is. If they know, if you give them what they're expecting, or they have a ways to manipulate your coverages to put themselves in advantageous situations, they're going to do that in that first drive. That's why you tend to see a lot of those first drive scores in games. Yeah. It's that is not just an Ohio State problem. That is just, and everyone in football has that kind of issue for the most part. So that's why that is. Sage says Illinois, Minnesota, Michigan State, Purdue, Penn State, Maryland, Wisconsin, Rutgers, Iowa, Northwestern, Indiana, Michigan, upsets, blowouts. Tony, which we have already given you the Michigan State, Purdue that I think we're all looking for today. Any other upsets there? Any other blowouts there? What are you saying?
I don't know if I see any other upsets. I think the blowout is Michigan over Indiana. I think Indiana is done. I don't know how much offense they have for a Michigan defense that is, it's fine, but nothing that Indiana really probably can't do much against them. So I think you're looking at a 34-10, 41-14, something like that over Indiana because their season is over. Michigan's isn't. They're trying to reestablish that they are one of the best 6 teams in the Big Ten East, and I think this is where they do that.
But real quick, Buzzsaw says defensive plays aren't scripted. If I said they were, I didn't mean to. That I was talking about offense. When I talk about offense, the opposing offense scripts plays. That's not something the defense does. So if I said defense, I didn't mean to.
I want to jump on that Iowa Northwestern game. Over under of 41 in that game. That's not quite the 36.5 that we saw last week in another game, but you have a Northwestern offense that's pretty inept and an Iowa offense that is likewise. The difference is Iowa can play defense at a high level. Northwestern's defense isn't the same since they lost a couple of their great linebackers and had the retirement of Mike Hankwitz, their defensive coordinator. I'm not sure there's an amount that I could be paid to watch. I mean, there is. I mean, we all have a price. I learned that from watching old school wrestling. Ted DiBiase taught me that. But it would take a significant amount of money to make me watch that game.
Somehow I'm reminded of the old Winston Churchill quote, which I'm sure is apocryphal, about we've established what you are, madam. Now we're just haggling over the price. That's Kevin in college football.
Finally found a hearing aid guy post that I'm willing to post, since most of them I don't. Tom needs to ditch the dial-up internet.
Yeah, I don't know what the issue is. I have run speed tests this morning, and my speed is perfectly fine. And I told my kids are off the streaming stuff upstairs. So
yeah, I'm not
sure.
going to run one on my side, but I'm like, I mean, I pay for this stupid gigabit internet. Of course, you never get that speed because none of your devices are set up for it. But I'm generally like 600 down and 60 up, so I don't know. But on to questions. Anthony Dodge does not care for the tired excuses. The opposition scores on the first drive because they script plays. Good coaches adjust in drive. It is because OSU always starts in a protect defense.
Well, I mean, sometimes I don't know how much adjusting you can necessarily do in a drive if so much of it is no huddle and you're just trying to manage as best you can and do what you know what you're doing, what you plan to do. So I know they are trying to adjust faster, and they don't want to be waiting until halftime to adjust. They adjust as much as they can on the sideline after drives, but also how many of these are just not making plays that are available to be made, not stopping that third down. I mean, that's what it was last week. The third down conversions were the big issue. I think I think Tom explained it well, where you have now Ohio State has a lot of film for teams to pick apart and really, really focus on that first drive and just try to put down that first boot that, okay, we've established now now we have a shot to win. But I just it happens all over college football, and I don't know that people should get too worked up about it. Is it frustrating? Sure. But when Ohio State is still winning by 27 points a game or whatever it is, I mean, would 34 sound better? I guess. But it's just the way it's very difficult to stop offenses in today's game, and that's everything is weighted against the defense, and so I think you just have to accept that, not accept bad good defense, but you're going to give up points. That's why if you're going to win a national championship, you have to have a great offense. You don't have to have a great defense. I mean, it's more important to score 40 than to stop to keep. Nobody's keeping anybody to like 7 points. I mean, you can't. That's not a realistic expectation. The more realistic expectation is we better score 40 to win 40 to 34.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Tom, because I was going to move it on, but go ahead and follow up.
No, I was going to say that's the trend in football right now. Is just everything is trending towards the offense. They've loosened the restrictions on change that. There's the penalties on pass interference have gotten tightened up a little bit. I mean, just like that has been the general trend in the NFL. That's been the general trend in college. That is the direction the game is going right now. And you cannot win a national championship playing trestle ball anymore. That's not going to be the way it works. And, Georgia is going to be, Georgia's coming as close as you can possibly do it this year. But, they are being, they're doing a lot more aggressively than Ohio State did in 2002.
It's just me, Tim79. I'm going to throw this question at Tony because I know he's a wrestling fan too. Best WWF wrestler of all time, Hulk or Warrior?
Well, it's definitely not the Ultimate Warrior or Warrior. It's Hulk Hogan is the biggest name in WWF and WWE history, as we all know. Even Tom knows that. But the really, Kevin, the Stone Cold or the Rock.
Well, I mean, it was just such a different era. I mean, don't drop that leg on me, Hulk. That is a finishing move of all time. I mean, come on. But I mean, his contributions to the industry, to sports entertainment, even though back then, don't you dare. This isn't scripted. This isn't any of that. I mean, I remember as a child watching the wrestling pay-per-views on VHS because my parents weren't going to take me to the theater that was going to have it at an expensive price. But yeah, Hulk over Warrior. But probably in terms of what modern wrestling is, I don't know. I think the better question is Stone Cold versus Rock, and I don't know. I mean, I think I think Stone Cold created much more of the Attitude Era just from what he was there, and then Rock picked it up and ran with it much further than Stone Cold did. So I don't know. And Tom is starting to have his eyes glaze over as we talk wrestling. So maybe we should
One more point.
get Dave Metzler in here or something and do Wrestling Observer.
I do think Hulk Hogan is the biggest name ever. And I even go back to Dolly Parton used to have a TV show, and one of the guests was going to be Hulk Hogan. So yeah, I watched that episode of the Dolly Parton show back when I was like 9 years old or whatever, because I mean, he was the man. And Tom, you know that you're from the East. You were a WWF guy back then. So
yes, the WWF, now WWE headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut. It's like 20 minutes from that is, yes. Close. I don't know who Timor is, but any cups less than 24 ounces. These are, I think, this might be 24. I don't know. We're sitting down here talking to you for like 2 hours. I'm not going to get up and walk around and stuff. So yes, I own plenty. I just don't come down here. I bring the big ones down here because I'm sitting down here. While you were accusing me of having my eyes glazed over, I was actually working, doing some college football related stuff. First drive for Florida against Alabama this year. 11 plays, 75 yards, 4:08 off the clock, ended in a field goal. Let's see. I'm just trying to go through. I'm just pulling up all of Alabama's box scores for this year. Ole Miss did not score on their opening drive. I'm just trying to pull up the depth of the. Let's see. Ole Miss's opening drive against Alabama. 16 plays, 59 yards, 6:09 off the clock, ended on downs. I mean, this is not like Ohio State is failing and it's a terrible disgrace. And, the first drive, like there is a reason that this happens to everyone. If it happens to Nick Saban, it is not just my coaches are bad. This is just kind of how things are right now. I'm trying to pull up the Texas A&M one because I suspect the Texas A&M did that as well. But yeah, I mean, this happens to Alabama too. This is just what football is right now, especially on the opening drive.
I like that the chat has turned into it went from Christmas music to wrestling.
Well, there was some breakfast in there too. There was breakfast.
Opening drive for Texas A&M, 7 plays, 54 yards, 3:25 off the clock, ends in a 38-yard field goal. Like you're going to give up points on the opening drive as often as not, especially when you're playing good teams. That's just that is not an Ohio State issue. That is just college football in 2021.
Sue with maybe a little bit of a sign by saying that a 5-point buck was peering into her kitchen window earlier during the live show, and then she followed that up by saying, "Is that a sign?" So does that mean the Bucks are going to win by 5? Is that what it is?
It's a sign that those pumpkin pancakes smell good, I think is what the.
Well, she said she was making that after the show, so
no.
I don't know. Nick, nobody should be playing but Henderson at running back. That's a heavy load to only have one guy carrying the mail.
And I think Mayan Williams has played well enough to continue to get carries. You can't just give him to Travion Henderson. I agree he needs to be playing more. And now that the games are close, he is. So that's good. You're going to get a healthy dose of Travion Henderson because I think Mayan Williams only played 1 or 2 drive carries, 5 yards against Penn State, and I think it may have only been 2 drives that we saw him out there. So like they're keeping Travion Henderson out there as much as possible. It's just sometimes you want to give him a rest, or we're going to be throwing the ball on this drive, or we're doing something that we don't necessarily need him for. Or you just want to take some. Give him a break, and you also want to keep other players engaged, especially in the era of the transfer portal. You've got they were down; they didn't have Master Teague. it's not like they want to lose Mayan Williams because he has been playing so sporadically this season that if he's with you, then you want to at least keep him engaged because you don't want to lose him. You don't want to have him, but lose him basically, So he I think we all know he's a good back and can do some things. I mean, he's averaging 7.3 yards per carry, and so there's reason to give him the ball. But yeah, Travion Henderson, 80% of the snaps, everybody else 20. I mean, I think that may be conservative moving forward.
All right, two more real quick. First two drives for Mississippi State against Alabama ended with an interception. 12 plays, 49 yards, ended with a field goal. And Tennessee went 3 plays, 6 yards in the first drive. Second drive, 8 plays, 75 yards, touchdown. Third drive, 5 plays, 64 yards, touchdown. Like this is football right now. If you don't like it, I am deeply sorry. That's how football is right now. It is not just an Ohio State problem.
Georgia plays in the SEC East, so they don't face offenses.
That's. I mean, you're kind of kidding, but also you're absolutely not kidding with that. Like there's a reason. And Akron go right down the field in Ohio State and score? I don't feel like they did. Maybe they did.
They may have. Anyway.
So yes, it happens. Don't worry, it happens to lots of guys. Is kind of the takeaway there. Sage Ohio says Ewers third string thing or not a thing. That is a thing today. No Jack Miller today. Jack Miller is suspended after being arrested for OVI on Friday morning. So that is a Quinn Ewers traveled with the team. So it is CJ Stroud first string, Kyle McCord second string, Quinn Ewers third string. And for the people who are joining us late, availability report comes out at 10:30 today. We'll be there in less than 10 minutes.
Do we think it came out late for a reason, Kevin?
I mean, they would never ever drag it just because of what might be on there or anything like that. So we saw that last year once we moved away from depth charts and everything else to availability reports. And it used to be it was coming out the day before, and then it was the morning of, and then it was 3 hours before the game. And now that it's an hour and a half before the game, my spidey senses are tingling a little bit. So, we'll see. We'll see. We've made it this far. I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to heavily speculate with 8 minutes to go. That's for certain. I can make it 8 more minutes, maybe even 7 and change.
Well, that'll do it for the show today, everybody. Yeah. Thank you all for tuning in.
On that note, TJVW94, how does Harbaugh need to finish the year to keep his job, or is he done enough to remain? Well, they're a top 10 team. They're not going to go to Indianapolis barring a ton of upheaval in terms of, a perfect storm. But I don't know. I mean, if being top 10 this year, I mean, here in November, I mean, that's got to be a win. I can't see them parting ways at that point. It'd be much more likely that Jim might sit there and say, well, this ain't ever going to get done and leave on his own. But I don't see that either. He's a very stubborn person. So I think he's done enough. What do you guys think?
Tom?
I think they are going to keep him because they don't really want to fire him. And I don't know who they're going to bring in who's going to be better. And, if you're 9-3, 10-2 this year, that's the historical expectation at Michigan. Like, I know Michigan wants to, I remember one of my favorite Tony tweets was, I think it was Amani Toomer a few years ago talking about how, like, losing 3-4 games a year, that's not what Michigan is. And then you posted Michigan's records during the year Amani Toomer was at Michigan, and they lost 3-4 games every year. It's like, no, this is literally what they have been for a long time. Even in the, this is not the 1970s anymore. Since the 1970s, the vast majority of Michigan seasons ends with 2 to 3 to 4 losses. That's just kind of what they are as a program. So if they're 9-3 this year, or with losses to Michigan State, or Penn State, and Ohio State, or they're 10-2 with losses to Michigan State and Ohio State, or whatever it is, fans are going to be frustrated. Fans are going to go into next season going, we're not going to get sucked into this again. We're not going to get sucked into another fast start in September. And then history has shown us that they will get sucked into another fast start in September. We're going to hear, boy, Minnesota's laying out blueprint, and oh boy, it's going to be, this is the year, and then Lucy's going to pull the football again, and then lather, rinse, repeat. So, as far as Harbaugh goes, I think he's done enough to keep his job at this point. So unless they just absolutely get annihilated by Ohio State and annihilated by Penn State, where, it's just completely non-competitive. If Ohio State beats them by 50, that's going to be a tough thing to sell. But, this seems like this Michigan team, I don't believe in this Michigan team, but I think this Michigan team is good enough. They're not going to get beat by 50. They would have gotten beat by 50 last year, but not this year. This year, I think it's going to be competitive enough that, if they lose by 17, you can probably sell that and keep going.
Do you guys know what Michigan's non-conference schedule is next year? I haven't pulled up. Are you guys prepared for this? It's going to blow your minds.
How many directional Michigan teams are they playing?
None. This is a serious non-conference schedule. They open with Colorado State. Then week 2 is Hawaii. Then week 3 is UConn. So, Colorado State, Hawaii, UConn. And then to start the Big Ten play, they get Maryland at home. So they will start the season 4-0, and it is going to be the most worthless 4-0 you have ever seen. That is a horrific non-conference schedule. I'm looking at it right now, and I am getting physically ill. Imagine paying for that ticket.
I'm already calling in sick for the first 3 Michigan Mondays next year. Like, no, we're not doing that. No. We're not wasting any time. We'll do Michigan State Monday. I'm sure they're playing something better.
Michigan September. Just do one for the month at the end of the month, because there's no why go weekly at that point? I mean, the chest thumping and bravado coming out from up there is going to be off the charts. Did you see what we did against Hawaii? I mean, that's got to extrapolate to what we're going to do against Penn State and Ohio State.
I'm thinking, like, you could ask, hey, give me the worst team in the nation, and give me the 5 worst teams in the nation. A lot of people are going to give you those 3 teams, and Michigan gets to play them all next year. Their 5th game of the season is at Kinnick, so I mean, they could be. I mean, who knows? But it could be 5-0. Then they play Penn State at home. Then it's Nebraska at home. Then it's at Michigan State. So they could be 7-0 before they lose at Michigan State, which,
Jordan saying at least it's UConn and not UMass. UConn and UMass played this year. UConn was not the team that won. UMass beat UConn this year. And UConn has already fired Randy Edsall, so they're going to be starting over. Walt Bell might get another year at UMass. But, yeah, I don't know. I think UConn might honestly be the poor man's UMass at this point, which is just like UConn's only win a bad FCS team, so not great.
And real quick, I want to discuss Michigan again. I think they finished 9-3 in the regular season. They've lost to Michigan State. I think that loss will remain. I think it will stay a loss, and then they will lose to Penn State and Ohio State. And then they go to a bowl game. Do you think Aiden Hutchinson and Dax Hill are going to play in that bowl game? I would not be shocked if they declined to play in whatever bowl game in Jacksonville or wherever. And now Michigan is going to be playing somebody of also 9 wins or 10 wins without their 2 best defensive players. So are we talking 9-4 this season, which is still good enough, but the fan base is going to be unhappy about the key losses. Like every game that could have meant something, you lost.
Well, that's a John Cooper season. You start out great, everything looks great. Oh boy, this is the year, and then you end the season with just straight into the side of the mountain. And you lose the game. You lose the Ohio State game if you're Michigan, or you lose the Michigan game if you're a John Cooper era Ohio State team. And then you go to a bowl game, and it's like, well, at least we can turn this around with oh no, we just lost to another SEC team in the Citrus Bowl. Like that's, I mean, if you are an Ohio State fan of a certain age, you remember exactly what those New Year's days felt like, and it was just so soul crushing. Just again, the same thing has happened. And Harbaugh's record against rivals, Notre Dame, Michigan State, Ohio State, is terrible. Harbaugh's record against Ohio State and in bowl games is terrible. It's like that's what they're going through right now. And they don't even have, the talent is better than it's been, but it's not like it was under Cooper, where it was like Ohio State had the best talent in the nation and was still doing that. It's just the talent is better, and they're doing that. They have like top 10, 15 talent now, not top 5 talent. But
availability reports out.
All right, Kevin Noon with the availability report. Let's talk about it.
Out: Cameron Babb, Marcus Crowley, Jansen Dunn, Tyler Friday, Darian Henry Young, Jalen Johnson, Mitchell Melton, Jaden McKenzie, Harry Miller, Noah Potter, Josh Proctor, and Garrett Wilson.
There it is. So yes, that was, I think there's really only, I don't know that Darian Henry Young was out last week. He might be a new one. I think
he's been in and out.
I think everyone else on that list was out last week. So Garrett Wilson, the only one who was a kind of a surprise. If you listened to last night's show, you may have heard us talking about Julian Fleming potentially having an opportunity to, meet or exceed his number of catches on the season this far, which is 2. So, Tony, do you have any thoughts on Julian Fleming or who might step into Garrett Wilson's role on offense this week?
Well, and the thing is, and we don't expect this to be a long-term thing from Garrett Wilson from what we've been told. So it's not like season ending or anything like that. But the thing about Ohio State's receivers is, Garrett Wilson is the X, and his backup is Marvin Harrison. And Jigba can play anywhere. So it's not just one of these things where like Jackson Smith and Jigba can go to X and Emeka Egbuka can come into the slot. We could see some Marvin Harrison. We could see Julian Fleming as well. I think we'll see a combination of all of those guys. And really, it's like, is there one guy you want to see more than the other? And for me, I don't think there is, because I want to see all of these guys. We haven't seen enough of them, so this is an opportunity to see more of them. I do think we will see quite a bit of Jackson Smith and Jigba again. And now what happens is, does Chris Olave continue to get bracketed and they continue to focus on him? And so does that free something third receiver is? And could that third receiver change from drive to drive? Or does one guy really start to be effective and they're like, okay, we're going to ride the hot hand right now and go with him? And you could tell me that's Egbuka. You could tell me that's Marvin Harrison. You could tell me it's Julian Fleming. And I'd be like, yeah, that sounds right. I mean, I believe that. I still go back to that Big Ten championship game last year. Julian Fleming stepped in for Chris Olave and was playing well until Justin Fields hurt his hand. Like, he had 4 catches, three catches on like the first drive or so, and it was looking good. And so I think it's there. I think it's possible for Julian Fleming. In terms of likelihood, I think maybe right now I'd put him third in that pecking order. I don't know who is first with Egbuka and Marvin Harrison, because, again, Marvin Harrison is Garrett Wilson's backup, but Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba can play anywhere, and so really they can move. It's kind of like the Ohio State offensive line. They can do whatever they need to get whoever they want on the field.
And that's Brian Hartline's philosophy, and it has been for a while, where you don't, it's a little bit like positionless basketball. They're kind of doing a little bit of positionless offensive line, but they're really doing positionless wide receivers. They, I think they've kind of, in a lot of ways, gotten away from recruiting the 5'9" kind of water bug kind of guys, because those guys just didn't, you had your Mookie Coopers, your Jalen Gills. They came in highly recruited, highly rated, and it's just like it didn't really work in the offense. So you got to have more, guys who are just kind of, they're recruiting a lot of the just kind of 6', 6'2" kind of receivers. You don't have the Jalen Harris. You don't have the Elijah Gardner, the 6'5" guys so much anymore. You don't have the 5'9", 5'10" guys so much anymore. It's just, they're kind of getting their same guys who can move around, move into different spots. And that makes you much less predictable. That makes, we talked earlier about, defenses trying, offenses looking at your defense and how you're defending certain sets, certain position or lineups where, hey, we always play trips to the field side or whatever. That makes you very predictable. Ohio State, when you have guys who can do a little bit of everything, move all around the field, play in a bunch of different spots, it's, Garrett Wilson is not always going to be the outside receiver to the trips to the field side. He can play wherever he wants. If he has played in the slot before, you could do that. So, that is that's something that makes you a lot less predictable as an offense, makes you a lot harder to defend. Razmataz wants to know, who is CJ Stroud's security blanket as his go-to receiver? I think the answer is Jackson Smith and Jigba. What do you think?
I think JSN for sure. I mean, he's the underneath has been there all along. He's you see so many times that he's just the one that's wide open. I mean, obviously not having Wilson and Olave, I mean, they could maybe put a little more focus on Jackson Smith and Jigba, but if you sit there and you put somebody else into Wilson's role, who is, certainly not going to be Garrett Wilson at this point of their development, but is still a reasonable facsimile. How are you going to, are you going to sit there and not pay as much attention to that guy and allow that guy to have a big game because you're concerned about what JSN's doing underneath? Or are you going to have to kind of still run a similar defense and everything that would have been there for Jackson is still going to be there for Jackson?
Let's also keep an eye on Jeremy Ruckert with 8 catches the last 2 weeks as a guy that could be relied on. But this could be like a 10-catch game for Jackson Smith and Jigba, and whether that's 120 yards or 220 yards, I think either of those are a possibility. It could be a big game for him. And then also, I'm not going to be shocked if we see something pretty explosive out of Emeka Egbuka as well. I mean, like I said earlier in the show, he's on the verge, and maybe that verge is in Lincoln, Nebraska. So
I'm going back looking for a specific message to put back up here. Go ahead. Again, just for no reason, just going to put that up there because that could be it.
Yeah, I mean the takeaway I think is this is not a long-term concern. It's not, this is not a broken leg kind of injury, so this is not something that should impact necessarily anything moving forward, but sounds like he did not make the trip to Nebraska.
So do we have any other questions in the queue? Like where are we in the?
No, we're pretty much. I mean, I have 2 or 3, but we've talked around them on the peripherals. So we're caught up. We're caught up.
All right. Well, then we will start wrapping this up. Then we waited out the availability report. We got there, everyone. We did it. Great job, team. So we will be back after the game. If you are watching right now, hit that like button. That will help other folks find this channel and these shows. Also, hit that bell, hit that subscribe button, because what that'll do is after the game, as soon as we go live for our post-game show, you'll get notified. You can join us, and we'll have, I'm sure, lots to talk about after the game. We typically do that relatively soon after the game. We will, but again, hit that subscribe button. You get notified. We'll put it out on our Twitter. We'll put it on the Ask the Insiders board of BuckeyeScoop as well. So thank you to Buckology Academy for the super chat. We appreciate it. And that'll do it for our pregame show. Thank you to Tony. Thank you to the birthday boy, Kevin. Happy birthday, old man. See if you can go get some dinner before we do our postgame show at about 4:00 or so. So
I might be in bed by the time we do the postgame show.
All right. Kevin will have his thoughts on Matlock and much, much more on our postgame show. We will talk to you guys then.